No mirror selfies, no shirtless pics of you holding a fish, no pics with large cats. Apparently that was a thing. Man, there's been some weird people.
These algorithms are somewhat playing God here, right? I mean, with this hotness score, with this caste system that they've made up, they're deciding like who gets to meet each other, who gets to mate.
That's something that we spent countless hours in directors meetings talking about, like who sees who. Like if I swipe on you, do you necessarily see me to be able to swipe on me? And there's all sorts of things that break that matrix of who sees who.
Gosh, 93 minutes a day. Swiping is addicting.
Yeah.
Right? It is just so addicting.
I don't know how people find my email address. Some people were asking me for like Bumble themed like napkins and stuff for their wedding. They're like, we heard you were the designer there and we wanted some banners and like
with your face on it. Will you officiate our wedding for us, Chris?
Yeah.
Hey everyone, I have a really exciting guest with us today. I've been waiting for this person for quite some time. And as some of you know, I have a penchant for the science of attraction and romance and how to model it mathematically with these algorithms. And I'm also a huge proponent of algorithmic safety and ethics. And we touch on all this stuff. So I have the co-founder of Tinder and the co-creator of Bumble. He walks us through the early days of how, they just kind of stumbled into Tinder, like just by the power of play. And how that led to the first female forward app, which is Bumble. And then he took a very candid position on the state of things today, big trends pre-pandemic, intra-pandemic, and post-pandemic. Where basically, he created the app and scaled it. That got most people using dating apps. Now he poses an argument for why that's actually unhealthy for our society. We touch on all these things like the pros and cons of offline dating, online dating, and he also gives us a little sneak peek about what he's up to next, which is super exciting. Without further ado, Chris Gulczynski. Hey, Chris, glad to finally have you here on the podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So, I personally have I've been off the apps, but leading up to this podcast, I did spend about a month or so online dating. I was a paid user of Bumble for that amount of time. So hopefully like these questions that I have for you should be decently informed from like a user's perspective.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Fire away.
Yeah. So look, it would be great if you could kind of walk us through the genesis of Tinder. I know that you had quite a bit of responsibility when it came to inventing the swipe, and there was some influence from apps like Grindr, like that. I mean, obviously this takes us back like over 10 years ago. So I'd love to, if you could walk us down memory lane. How did Tinder come about? How did your involvement come about, and so forth?
Yeah, sure. So I was living in San Francisco at the time, and my girlfriend then was answering a job request from Sean, who would turn out to be the CEO of Tinder. And she was working on some other project that he had going on, because it was actually an incubator. Tinder came out of an incubator called Hatch. It was funded by IAC, who also owned companies like Match.com and College Humor, City Search at the time. There was a bunch of other ones.
Yeah, I think IAC spinned out, right? Or they spun Match out now,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. So they spun Match out as like a whole division, right? And there's like Tinder's underneath of it, and there's a lot of other properties too. It's not Plenty of Fish. It's
Hinge,
recently.
the lead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, not Bumble, not your most recent one. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, it's an interesting, and we can get into this later, but like, for dating app founders, it's a very interesting business model, right? Like, cause it's like, all they have to like look forward to is an exit. As an exit would be selling to Match, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's only a few people that are in the market for, I think, the dating apps. Bumble is organized under Magic Labs. That was the company that they IPO'd under. And there's a few other properties underneath there too. There was a gay dating app. I think it was Chappie that went with it. Badoo is another social network that Bumble's actually built on. Anyway, I digress. The Tinder, how I became involved with Tinder. So my girlfriend was working as a designer. We both did the same thing. She was there for about 2 weeks and then got some other job offer and was like, well, my partner does design too. And I had worked with like one or two startups before then. And I was pretty fresh as a designer. So I took the call and ended up getting the position and was the designer on the team. It was just 3 other guys and me. Sean Rad was the CEO. John Badine was the iOS guy. Joe Munoz was the backend engineer, and then me. So we were actually working on something else called Cardify at the time. It was like a local loyalty rewards.
Cardify.
Yeah, no, it was actually really cool and pragmatic. It's like what attracted me to the team in the first place. It was you would like connect your card, like your debit credit card, and then when you would make purchases with that card at partner locations, like partner merchants that we had done like BD relationships with, let's say like a coffee shop, you would accrue like loyalty points, and then those loyalty points could be redeemed for rewards that the partner would set. And eventually those reward points would be like interchangeable with like other things. So if you earn it at one, you could use it at the other two. It's funny. I'm seeing a lot of that stuff kind of like creep through in like interoperable tokens now with like Web3 stuff.
Yeah, that's been a big like movement for like a use case for blockchain as well, like loyalty points and stuff like that. It's amazing that Tinder started that way. How did you guys pivot out of that? I don't see how dating app at all is related to loyalty point.
So we had like 2 weeks downtime because we were using credit card transactional data, and Apple was being like really like investigative, like making sure that we weren't like
draconian.
Yeah, right. Like we weren't like taking people's information or misusing it or mishandling it. It all had to be like super secure. So the CEO pitched what him and Joe, the backend guy, did at a hackathon like 2 weeks before I joined, which was basically finding Facebook friends around you that wanted to I don't even like date or flirt or just with like romantic intent. So me and John, the iOS guy, were like, oh, like that sounds like kind of a meat market. I don't know if we want to work on that, but Sean and Joe kind of talked us into it. And so I designed out the prototype. It was really just a fast, I don't know. I wasn't a very good designer back then either. It took me like maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then I think Joe and John worked on it for maybe a month or two to code everything. And we kind of put it out in the wild, and then we started seeing like results. We had people that were doing sales for Cardify. Namely, that's how Whitney Wolf came around. Was doing sales for Cardify, and then we switched her to doing marketing for Tinder, and that's when she went to SMU up and down for sorority and fraternity row, and got people to sign up. We did a big party at USC, and then the numbers just started going up and to the right. And poor Cardify wasn't really doing it. Was like up against Groupon. And
wait a minute, so like it sounds like you guys were serious about this loyalty card thing, Cardify, and then out of like a 2-week hackathon fun thing that you guys were kind of just as like a pet project, that's what everyone got excited about. Like I mean, this is experimentation. You guys were just experimenting, having fun.
It was
but it's that classic story of like what do you call that, the power of play, right? Just like messing around.
There was like no consequence to it. It was just like, let's make something fun together. Because we quickly realized as a team, like we all like worked really well together. We could like churn out cool looking stuff like in relatively fast fashion. So we just took advantage of it and had fun. We didn't even have the swipe, honestly. It was just the buttons too when we first did it. And the swipe came later. Personally, I was showing it to a friend and they were trying to like, it looked like a stack of cards. It was what we called skeuomorphic design. Like it mirrored like a real life, like it had depth to it. You know, it looked like you could interact with it. So the person was trying to like move the picture, and I was like, no, you gotta use the buttons. So then I took the feedback to the rest of the team, and I was like, guys, they want to like move these cards around. And John Badine, the iOS guy, was like, I did some flashcard app, and maybe if we used it vertically, we could make it like a binary decision. And then I was the designer. I made the little light and the nope stamp. As it took us a little time to get the physics right. But boom, right. It wasn't even about the swipe at all. It was just kind of like a convenient solution to interacting with the product itself.
So, I mean, look, I mean, you say it very calmly. But the swipe, it was revolutionary, right? The design of it, having a very simple yes and no, and it fit the phone screen quite well, right? I mean, it kind of dovetailed with the advent of the iPhone when they took away the buttons and the of a smartphone, and they made it a complete like screen. Now it's like a deck of cards, right? That you're just simply with one finger left, right,
Yep.
That because I remember that era, that was a huge step up from your web-based apps like OkCupid at the time, and the easy onboarding and whatnot. This was quite revolutionary.
Right. You're right about that. I was going to say about the onboarding too, because like those web-based things, they ask you like 96 questions, and you got to get really deep into it. So it was like a fundamental shift of like you sign up and you.
That's right.
You used Facebook, so you probably didn't have to put in like any other information except just authing through, and it was instant results. It was like, wow, there's people, and I'm like directly to it. So. Once we kind of like put all those like little pieces together, it was just kind of a magic potion.
Yeah, and as you said, you were campaigning, or Whitney was, I guess, around USC, and noticed a big uptick in adoption. Is that right?
Yeah. So we could see it like, I guess, light up in like geographic areas just because it was dependent on like who was around you. So like running out of people in the early days was like very much a problem. Like you would see people from like your fraternity or your sorority or whatever. And then it was just like crickets. So I remember, I think maybe it was Barstool in the early days was like, we released, I think September of 2012, it came into the App Store, and by June, they were like, Tinder is dead. Like that was the headline. I was like, oh man, these guys.
Wow.
To us. Yeah. But it was because density was a problem back in the early days, right? We didn't have that like really robust funnel for all these people coming in. A lot of it was just by hand sending people to like Whitney, going to SMU or going to other campuses and trying to like get people excited. And I'm, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, college marketing was very much in its infancy or just kind of like an untapped resource. So there wasn't all these like ambassador programs now where it's like really accessible. So we were really trying to like rough that road in, I guess, ourselves.
Yeah, I gotta ask, as a Bruin, like why did you guys go to USC and not any other school?
Sean and Justin. Oh my God, why can't I think of his last name? Mateen. I was going to say Budine. Justin Mateen. No, but Sean and Justin were. I don't know if they had graduated from USC, but they had like gone there. They had taken some classes at USC, so they kind of had like an in with the cool kid crowd.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't like a bias of like UCLA versus USC. Like there was no strategy other than like we know people at USC.
Yeah. It's like, you just look at the first point of entry, like just like anything, right? Like, it's like your friends are the first people to use any type of application, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. And you guys came out of an incubator and you guys pivoted. Yeah. What a beautiful ride.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, inventing the swipe, that's awesome. How you stumbled upon that. Okay, now let's move over to talk about like Bumble, right? Of course, like I am interested in like hearing, what learnings you had from Tinder, from your experience at Tinder, your time there, and then going over to Bumble, and like, what kind of propelled that? What learnings did you take over? How did like the whole like women make the first move type thing? How was that invented and so forth?
For sure. So I think Bumble was kind of born out of the problems that Tinder created for itself unknowingly. So like when we made Tinder, it was very much like low consequence. It was not supposed to be like relationship. It wasn't supposed to go up against like eHarmony and like all those other serious ones. Like our first tagline was the flirting game, right? So like super low consequence, but then it just kind of like through reasons that just kind of like were, I think, maybe inherent to the ease of the product, led to this kind of like hookup-y like moniker for it, right? And it wasn't something that I think was.
So that was not intended.
No. It was just supposed to be like a lighthearted thing. But like I said, because of the confluence of like how people used it, showing people around you for the intents of dating, I guess there was nowhere it could have gone, but like led to it. But it wasn't like an inherent, like I wasn't thinking about that when I designed the interface. I wasn't trying to make it like the quickest way to sex possible. But I mean,
yeah, interesting. But ironically, like it did have that connotation, and I thought the name also had some kind of implication as well. But you had no intention of that.
No. And then the name was very harmless. It was initially going to be Matchbox, but since IEC owned Match, they were like, no, try again. So we were kind of like spitballing what the name was going to be. Oh man, we threw out a ton of them, like flirt, pair, jive. I think it was Whitney or Joe that said Tinder. So honestly, I just used the same font that I was using for Match and typed out Tinder. We made the little flame, and it was just like no more thought than that had gone into it. So,
gotcha. And it ended up being kind of like you guys weren't trying to go up against the eHarmonies, obviously. Like, as you put it, like those websites, they require far more, on the user's undertaking as far as like, onboarding goes, right? Like they got to answer a series of questions. Sometimes like there's a paywall.
I had never used a dating app. I don't even like to this day, I've never used like eHarmony. I don't know what any of those other dating apps did.
That's right. You had a girlfriend.
No,
so
yeah,
you
I had
were
a girlfriend the whole time through Bumble too. So like I was not solving a problem that I was like having in personal life. So I was just looking at this as a product designer saying like, okay, here's the problem set. Now I'm going to solve it with UI and UX. So like I didn't look at all at what other people were doing. I just solved the problem ahead of me. And that's kind of how I think maybe we came up with some differentiation.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, I interrupted you. You were talking about like the transition over to Bumble, the learnings that you took from Tinder, inventing, that whole women's initiate first.
Yeah. So like I said, there was kind of this opening that we had kind of made unintentionally at Tinder, right, through the kind of user behavior. And we saw this opportunity to address, I think, some longstanding like gender issues, and maybe just make it a kinder place. So I had gotten a phone call. I had left the company for a while. I was only there maybe the first 2.5 years. So after I had left in like early, I want to say like 2014, I had been gone for maybe a year, and I got a call from Whitney saying that she had left the company. There was some outstanding circumstances on why that was. I don't really want to get into the legal stuff. It's been written about enough. So if people are
fair enough,
yeah, if you're curious, you can look it up. But I got a call to come out to London, and that she was talking with someone that was very interested in making a new dating app. And I think competing in that space, right? Like realizing how much opportunity there was, seeing the rapid rise of Tinder.
So you were already out of Tinder, you were kind of chilling,
Yeah.
and you get a phone call from Whitney. Sounds interesting to you.
Yeah. So she's like, you got to get on a plane to London, and like come talk to me and to who I would find out was Andre Andreev, our business partner, and financier and CEO of Badoo, which was the parent company then that Bumble came out of. So anyway, I flew to London and we're talking about like a kindness project, right? Like that Whitney had been kind of like thinking like where her mindset was, because she had just been through some kind of like traumatic things in her own personal life, and was trying to get back to this idea of like, stewardship, of like chivalry almost. I don't want to like genderize it with chivalry, but like that kind of custodial like respect between people. So Andre, wanting to kind of compete in the dating space, kind of posited to us of like, how can we apply this to a product and still, I guess I don't want to say the word compete, but still be a viable product considering what's already out there and the way people are using it and like the user behavior associated with it. So we kind of sequestered ourselves for a while. It turned into a trip to Mykonos in the Greek islands.
Oh, where all the best app ideas are made.
As people do, right? You're ideating on the dating app. Let's go to Mykonos. So that was all Andre. He was a very interesting and fun business partner to have. So anyway,
sounds interesting.
Yeah. So we kind of come up with this idea of let's solve this problem of the kind of user behavior that we're seeing on Tinder and some of the other dating sites. So
can you be specific about that user behavior?
Like the hookup culture, right? Like the kind of moniker that and a name that Tinder had made for itself. The reputation of it being like that fast to scratch that itch, right? That carnal, intimate itch, because there's more there. It's more than just that instant hookup. There's, I don't know, finding people and connecting people is just this like innate human thing, and that doesn't just need to be focused on like quick sex, right? Not to put it in a crass way, but
so you guys really were trying to solve the problem, genuinely try to solve the problem of connection.
Yeah. Very intentionally. We had seen what we'd done with Tinder and the power of it, right? And it just quickly spun into, I think, the reputation that Tinder got for itself. And we realized like, wow, there is a lot available here, and there's a really willing audience that maybe we can focus this on towards like real connection rather than just that, tonight connection maybe. So
yeah. So it sounds like you weren't exactly, both of you guys, being former Tinder co-founders, it doesn't sound like you guys were too happy about what Tinder had become.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like my initial reluctance to even like make the prototype just because I thought it was going to be a meme market, I think was kind of validated just because of, I don't know, the quick nature of it. Like I said, it wasn't intentional in any way, but I don't know, people do what people do. And this app seemed to like cut out all those like pain points and allowed it to get right to the point, which is great for a company, but like, there's all. You
mean for a business perspective, like business goals, it's damn good.
Yeah. I mean, like people are using it like gangbusters, but like they're.
I'm sure your investors were very happy about it.
Yeah. IC was like, way to go, guys. But there was this unintended societal effect that we saw having this like little genesis, right? So we saw this just opportunity to jump into the space that was just like booming at the time. That we could through I think product and branding, create this like new kind of like, I don't know, responsible stewardship of like a mix of like, what traditional dating is with this new mobile experience and like a more moderated kind of like branded experience.
So you guys were very well aware of the societal impact that Tinder dating apps has based on its scale, its sheer scale.
Yeah, yeah. It had that like that moment at the Olympics. I forget what that was. In was it Sochi? Where all the kids were like using, all the Olympians were using Tinder because they had found it in their schools or colleges wherever they came from, and they took it to the Olympics with them. So like it was like a thing. Like Tinder was definitely like a large company, millions and millions of users. So it was starting to have this like impact on society, and people were talking about it. People were writing about it. It was very much in the daily. Like,
must have been super exciting for you. Well, that I mean, really, it's kind of a there was an article written about like 5 years ago or something like that of the sort. But the scale and impact of dating apps, it's almost as if they're playing God. Really, I mean, they're controlling who gets to mate, who gets to have babies, who doesn't. To a large, I mean, I'm not saying that.
No, you're right. You're right, and people think there's got to be some like Machiavellian string pulling in the background, but honestly, it's all optimizing for the paid users and increasing your KPIs and pumping your valuation and yada yada yada. So it's like you're just chasing consumer trends at the end of the day without any, I think, like forethought to this like insidious social impact you might be having. So I don't know.
So it sounds like commercial interests. Like I know that your true goal was to basically augment human connection, long-term human connection, and something that is a bit more wholesome. Now, it seems like what's happened, as you put it, was that they're like commercial interests because it's a business, right? Yeah. And that was going to be one of my questions for you, is just like, well, how I'm sure like the VCs are we're on your backs, like trying to amp up user engagement, right? But how do you amp up user engagement for an app that's like made for long-term connection? And you know what I mean? Like it's not going to be a sustainable business model if like success for the actual mission is people turn off the app, right? Oh, yeah. And I don't think VCs are going to like that very much.
You're right. Well, one, Tinder and Bumble were unique in that they didn't have any outside investment. This was all like a single point of finance for both Tinder. Tinder was IEC, and then Bumble had a single point of financing too. So we were lucky that we didn't have to like report to shareholders, but we did have to kick up to like the IEC board. And they weren't just worried about our KPIs. They were worried about how we were affecting Match.com and Christian Mingle and Plenty of Fish and all these other dating apps too, because the people that used Tinder also used all those other ones. It wasn't like two separate audiences, right? Like they were all like blending together. So they were interested to see how our metrics were affecting the user base, and then almost like cherry picking out the cool stuff that they thought was performing and trying to put it in other properties.
Trying to put it into like Match or something, some of their other portcos.
Exactly. So like they would see like a great conversion rate, like on how we were doing something. And they would basically try and just lift it out and see if it would work in Match, or see if it would work in, whatever.
That's interesting, because I've always thought like those businesses were fairly siloed and there was no like cross pollination. Of course, like I understand.
We sat next to each other. Like we sat next to the Match.com guys in the 8833 building on Sunset. So like they were like, hey, you want to come to like our design talk today? We used to compete for lunch space.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, they're very, to me, like they seem like very different users, but you made this comment, in another conversation before that, like, and people know this at this point, that like, the dating app space, they're really just chasing all the same users, right? Like
it is.
The same user that's on Bumble is going to be on Tinder, is going to be on Hinge, and so forth, right? That's part of the, I guess, like, some of the complaints that I've heard so far about like dating apps.
It's like a slightly different intention, I think, amongst all the different properties. You expect different results than you do with Tinder than you do with like eHarmony or something. I don't mean to keep using eHarmony, but that's like the epitome of like I'm going to sit down and make a dating profile for myself that I could really think of. I was thinking of that old guy. Remember the commercials? And he would be like, eharmony.com. It was super creepy. But no, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you said, it's a business. So they need to optimize. But also, you mentioned this built-in attrition. You're really reliant on this constant stream of not just users, but fun, engaging users to maintain this branding perception, right? So in the early days of Tinder and Bumble, it was easy because we would go to a college, onboard all the kids, and then all the people that they saw were people from their campus. So if they didn't know them, they knew that they were part of it. So it seemed like it was for them. So it was these little pods of geographic areas where the quality was super high, but inherently as that network grows, which is exacerbated by the attrition problem, right? Because you're constantly expiring on those people one after the other, and you'll never see them again. So that network grows super fast, and you lose control of the quality because you have to have that rapid influx of people. And at the same time, you still have to optimize for the paid user. So the people that are going through, finding dates, messaging, maybe going on a date, and then starting the whole process over, those are the gold, right? So you got to keep those people engaged as well. So it's
the people that are paid users, and you have to also simultaneously have users onboarding on the app constantly. Is that right?
Yes. So it's you've got people being expired just by normal use. You've got all these brand new people coming in, and then you've got this hardcore, maybe 5 to 10% of the user base that's actually paying for it, and that is churning through using it like a power user. So I don't know. It's
what, and a power user, describe that for a second. Power user is somebody that's getting older, that using it quite actively. That means that they are what's the for these power users or whoever, what's the average amount of time they would spend on the app daily? Do you have that metric?
Tinder, super early days, was 30 to 40 minutes per day per user, and not a power, just a general average user. Bumble, I think we got up to I want to say into the 90s, and that was split between 90 minutes, split between 4 or 5 sessions. That was super early data. I mean, they've both grown bazillions since then.
What was it? Was it during pandemic years or something like that?
No.
These seem really high.
2016, maybe 2015. We launched.
Gosh, 93 minutes a day.
Yeah.
the user is clearly addicted. I've sat there and I've swiped. Swiping is addicting. Yeah. Right. It is just so addicting. But doesn't that lead to kind of everything you're talking about right now? The addiction to swiping, the influx of constantly getting new users, catering towards the power user that's kind of paid user that's kind of burning through dates and whatnot. Mm-hmm. What kind of environment does that breed?
It's I don't know. We've had over a decade now to kind of sit back and see how it affects things. And it's like chasing a ball down a hill, man. You can never quite get there. It's endemic of all of social media, really, right? It stuff will rot your brain. And it's becoming more and more.
It's kind of like junk food.
It's junk food. It's a quick serotonin boost. It's not something that's I don't know, lasting and that's going to be fruitful in your life. I mean, don't get me wrong. A ton of people have gotten married and had babies and written success stories. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. I really do. And I still continue to hear it too. I don't know how people find my email address. Some people were asking me for Bumble themed, napkins and stuff for their wedding. They're like, we heard you were the designer there and we wanted some banners and
with your face on it. Will you officiate our wedding for us, Chris?
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's definitely had this overall impact that, like I said, is I think very similar to the overall impact that social media is having, and it's all because, and I hate to keep harping on this, but it's the optimization of the paid user. it's like getting blood from a stone at a certain point. Like you can only tap that so much for so much revenue, right? Like those people are going to only pay so much to see who likes them on Tinder or Bumble, or pay for Spotlight, or pay for, this, that, and the other thing, before it's like, well, they're just going to either age out, or they get married, or they just get bored with it, or something else comes along, and I think you mentioned pandemic before. Man, that has just been the great leveler, I think, of not just dating apps, but like consumer social, like as a whole, right? Like our consumer behavior is just like off the charts now. What we thought was normal was not normal, and then when the stuff that we saw during the pandemic was just temporary, and everyone tried to like get in line and thought it was a new normal, and it's like, well, surprise, it's not. And now we're seeing this move toward like, I want to just meet people like me, like I don't want to sit there and swipe for 93 minutes a day. I want to go out. I want to do a run club. I want to whatever. And like, that's like what we're seeing in consumer.
Yeah. So that was going to be one of my questions as well. It's like, you've seen so many cycles through the dating app era. You've seen it from, the online web-based app which is when around the time you came in, you turned it into a swipe-based app on phone. And then, you had this heightened exposure in the pandemic era where this was the only way that people could really meet up. And now you're talking about the current trend that we're looking at post-pandemic, let's just call it.
Yes.
And we see it all around. People are favoring IRL, in real life, type of events, like in business, in dating. I'd love it if you could speak to that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, look, Google search run clubs. Like it is like the new way people are meeting. And I just kind of stumbled on this myself. It's like they're using these like athletic clubs, run clubs, which I think is cool, right? Like you're doing something healthy and fun, but it's not just about the exercise. People are using them for networking. People are using them for dating. Because they are usually like-minded people. They come from probably very similar social circles, socioeconomic circles, and they're most likely living around you. So it's like it solves all those things that mobile dating was trying to solve in the most normal, human, authentic,
innocuous
way,
yeah.
Right? Like it's like something that anybody would do. So and it's not going unnoticed because Tinder and Bumble are both getting in on this like run club thing or the community thing, right? Community is kind of like a buzzword coming into play because of like the whole post-pandemic IRL thing. So they're like rushing, I think, to try and understand this consumer behavior and be.
So let's back up 1 second. So like, I also would love to understand or get your take on it. Like, how did it happen? Like, so I swear, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I invested a shit ton of money right before the pandemic hit, and it was like clearly announced. I poured a lot of money into IAC and Match, thinking like this is going to be the future.
Yeah.
Right. This is going to because doing stuff remote is far more efficient. Therefore, it is better. And then here we are today. Talking about like, well, no, we prefer a community IRL stuff in real life stuff. Mm-hmm. How did that, and from your perspective, like, how did that happen?
I feel like it's just a natural behavioral backlash. So it's just more about what we were talking about with Tinder and Bumble, setting up this kind of expectation of like quantity, right? Like you're going to get a bunch of people. Most guys swipe it's like, right. Like there's no thought to it. I'll sort it out on the back end, right? Like whatever matches I'll make, I'll figure it out later. So it's like that type of results by overwhelming quantity. I think, well, I mean, it was destined for people to kind of fatigue on it, right? Because it's like, you're just going to hit this endpoint of there's just no more people that you can onboard. Like people aren't, aging into your demo quick enough. But two, I think the whole isolation thing from the pandemic pushed us faster into I want like a quality connection. I want a real connection. I want to go out and like do something. I want to experience something. I mean, we all sat inside for 2 years. It was crazy. They're going to be studying the not just individual psychological effects, but like the societal psychological effects of this for 100 years, man. And it just made, I think, people realize it's not giving them like another niche dating app. It's that they just don't want to date that way anymore. They don't want to meet people like that. They want to meet like real people in real situations. So like I said, the whole Run Club thing satisfies all those verticals of like what I need to meet someone just by being itself, right? Like there's no technology.
More human. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, I think that's absolutely right. Like it's just a much more human way versus kind of like, endlessly swiping on a screen. And so like, I think.
But before, like how the initial problem was just trying to like solve a human problem of like meeting people. And it's analogous to the way that you search out people, right? Like you see a number of people and then you're like, oh, maybe I like these people. And then I'll go a little further. It's the same as like you walk into a bar and you're like, oh, maybe that person's nice, or I'll go talk to that person. And then it leads to a conversation, right? And like hit and miss and you retry. So it's obvious that like we've kind of like run the arc of solving that. And we're like, okay, connection, number of quantity, it's like whatever. Now let's like solve the other human problem. Like just like you were saying.
Right. Yeah. And to your point, like, as in preparation of this interview, like I heard that, the way that the UX is designed for these swipe-based apps, it actually doesn't serve like women too well, because women are more attracted to, psychological cues versus physiological. So these swipe-based apps, they kind of start you off in a very like, in a way which, it's like focuses on looks for
your psychology is like stacked against you already. It's like amplifying the problem.
Yeah, that's right. And so there was actually a paper that I read from the Fed that came out recently, and how online dating apps have led to income inequality, right? And then it went further on to say that it hasn't really solved the problem or the ease of finding a marital mate since the 60s. And they're comparing. They did a decent rigorous study from like the 60s all the way till now. I mean, did you have any perspective on that? Like it apparently, like it's led to apps are. I was just about to jump into this, but it seems like apps have led to kind of a paradox of choice for these women, or not just women, but people in general. It's like they've got an app to help them connect with people and swipe with a bunch of people, but people have gotten addicted to swiping and then now they have like 10 different conversations they got to manage, and they got all these choices. Did you see anything similar, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I guess it's part of the perspective that making Tinder gave us while we were attempting Bumble too, right? Like we saw that like inequality, that it seemed like guys kind of like ran the whole show, which kind of precipitated the whole, women make the first move. Like,
I see.
Like Sadie Hawkins Day Dance, where the girls ask the guys. It was more like that, right? Like there's a pacing setup that the woman's going to be in control of, and that was.
So that's how the woman came. The first move it came about. Like it was like Tinder was like, okay, guys are running the show here. Now we just need to have an answer to that, and so this is the best answer. Okay,
100%. We even like for the pro features wanted to charge women less based on the current like wage gap. So it was like, I think $7 women made to every dollar a man made. So we were going to like do the same thing if women wanted to
subsidize.
Yeah. But Apple was like, wow, that's gender discrimination. You can't do this, you can't do that. I think there was even some lawsuits that some guy filed against Bumble for the damages that women going first was like biased or something. I don't know the details of it, but it kind of seems silly.
Wild.
Right. No, you talk to like these problems in society that females face. It's like, was it a step in the right direction compared to Tinder? Yes. Like, did it solve all the problems? Like, absolutely not. But it's just like one iteration. right? It's like one more iteration that the next
What I see.
people can stand on top of and maybe make something like a little bit better, a little more equitable, a little more like easy for everyone to use, like that solves more human problems too. Because it's like we've already solved that problem and squeezed as much cash. I mean,
out of that user base. Yeah.
Exactly. So like now the free market dictates, let's do something else.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like when, you had alluded that the dating app space, at least like the traditional swipe based apps is rather saturated. It's going over after the same user base. Mm-hmm. We went through like a heyday period called the pandemic period, where, we've just kind of fatigued a bunch of users, with, these swipe based kind of, attributes or usage. Mm-hmm. What are some of the reasons that you're hearing, that are causing people to leave dating apps today, or not leave, but get fatigued by them, dislike them, and so forth?
Number one that I hear is quality of people, quality of matches, quality of like conversation, infiltrated by bots. Half of it is like people fishing for like OnlyFans subscriptions. It's just like what we touched on before, that inherent degradation of the quality of the network, because you have to keep casting the net wider and wider and wider to fill that attrition hole, right? That the product inherently has. So you're
that influx of users that the product is trying to.
You've churned out all the cool kids, all the USC kids, all the SMU kids. They've aged out, right? They grew up 10 years ago when they were in college, and now they're like adults, and they're not capturing the new USC kids and new SMU kids, right? Because their marketing is, I don't know, not where it was, and I don't know, like how Snapchat does this. Snapchat's going after like high school kids again, and it's actually taken hold. For the longest time, Snapchat, there was just no path to monetization. What's his name? Even Spiegel said no to the Facebook acquisition. It was like $3.3 billion. And he's like, I'm going to go my own way. Went through this IPO, and then, it kind of floundered. No one really knew how to monetize. I don't know if they still know how to monetize, but they found a new audience and spent the marketing dollars to like keep that churn going, right? Like you can't just make an app and let it cruise for 10 years and think those same people are just going to like keep using it, or some new group of people, some new generation like Gen Z and Gen Alpha is just going to like wander upon this and use it, right? It's like like when your mom uses Facebook, your parents use Facebook, right? Maybe for like us older folk, that's not cool. Like you don't want to see old people on Tinder and Bumble. Like that's not part of that's not part of the experience. So
Gen Z's, they're not using apps anymore. It seems.
No, they're not using dating apps. They're like the pioneers of the IRL stuff, right? Like they're down for like chit chatting and stuff online, but when it comes to like the real meat and bones of their social interaction, they want to get out, because loneliness for them is like this absolute like epidemic. So exacerbated by the pandemic too.
That's right. Okay, that makes sense. It's some of the reasons I've heard, people are just fatigued from dating apps is, as you put it, same group of people over and over. Hyper dismissiveness, which makes sense with what we just talked about. Like you gotta after trying to get as many people on there as possible, it leads to an addiction of swiping, but that's what these apps want. They want to amp user engagement, and optimize for the paid user that churns through them. So it leads to hyper dismissiveness. All these options, right, for one user, and then it leads to like the feeling of disposability, ultimately, and this is. From what I understand, like this toxic treatment seems to be reflected gender to each gender, right? Like It's like what this person will be dismissive and ghost this person, and then that person kind of does the same thing, right?
Yeah. So like in the early Bumble days specifically, we marketed towards females, young females, from probably like 21 to 28, 29, right? Like that was like the magic audience for us that brought everything. And we didn't have to market towards males, because it was just like, if the females were there, the males were going to
Is that most of your paid users, by the way, males?
Like very, very overwhelmingly, yes. They're the people that use like the spotlight where it like shows you higher up in the results. Show me who liked me, right? It basically lets you skip the swiping part. But yeah.
So is it fair?
Go ahead.
So is it fair to say that, if the app is optimizing for paid users and most of the paid users are male, is it fair to say that, yeah.
Now you're getting it. They're not doing that marketing effort towards the people that made it what it was, right? They're optimizing toward the paid users, which is in diametric opposition to what got them there in the first place.
I see. And most of those paid users are males, so they're optimizing for males, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And so, obviously we've got a good dose of, the apps over the pandemic, and now we're moving into the IRL stuff now, because obviously people are coming to light that it's in favor. Just out of curiosity, this has come about from a number of different directions, and I'm asking on behalf of like people that are going to be listening to this. Is there a demographic of people that get a disproportionate amount of attention on these apps?
The bots. That's a trick question. The bots do. They're just absolutely infiltrated. I don't know. But you mean more of like based on looks or gender or like
both, a combination, but basically ethnicity, gender, what are other attributes are important? Height, religion. Is there like a demographic that there's a belief that like there is some top 10% of people that get 80%, or sorry, it's 80-20 rule. Like, but 20% of people get 80% of the attention on those apps. They get their messages respond to quicker, and so forth. And maybe it's not a demographic. Maybe it's just paid users, right? But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any perspective on that?
So like personal anecdote, like, no, I couldn't really like speak to that. That's if there is any type of like programmatic preference given, that would have been something that came after the fact if they're doing it. And I don't personally think that's, I don't know, like a great business practice. Even if it is profitable too. I'm a big like equality, equity kind of person to inclusivity. So I personally would like skew away from that. But I don't know. I don't know if there's preference given. I feel like that would be like a bombshell revelation. If someone could bring out like, hey, this specific either gender, this ethnicity, this religion, this political affiliation is being preferentially shown higher or ranked higher. Oh man, I feel that's like maybe that's like a little conspiracy theory-ish. I don't know. Who knows? But personally, no, I can't really speak to any of it. And like I said, just my personal feelings would hope that there's no preference given.
I see. And so like, there wasn't any, I read a long time ago that there was like a kind of a dating caste system, right? Where to keep the kind of quality of, I guess people, like, I guess like.
So that's different. That's giving preference to like, to a user based on like gender, ethnicity, racial, whatever. That's, I don't know. That gets into like weird territory. But there was definitely like a service algorithm that would keep like people together, right? And we just casually refer to that as a hotness score.
The hotness score, yeah, that's right. That metric.
It's a crass term. But what it was is if I'm a 5, and I'm not saying I'm a 5, I'm just saying theoretically I'm a 5. I'm going to see other 5s with little variation, right? And that's based on who I swipe on and who swipes on me. So then it makes this like homologous like score for me, and then I'm grouped together with people of the same score because those people are the most likely to match with each other. Like a 3 and a 10, probably it's not going to work. But and this was just to kind of like spice things up. They would throw in like people that were a little higher as like something to shoot for, right? Because if you show a guy,
keep you grabbing,
right?
Yeah.
You show a 4 or 5 guy, a 9 or 10 girl, he is most likely going to swipe yes, right? Or at least it's going to interest him enough to keep going.
But will that girl ever be shown that guy? Like, meaning, like, the guy will swipe right, but will the girl even have an opportunity to see that guy?
Yeah, that's something that we spent countless hours in directors meetings talking about, like, who sees who. Like, if I swipe on you, do you necessarily see me to be able to swipe on me? And there's all sorts of things that break that matrix of who sees who based on like last active, your location could change. I mean, there's like a ton of different factors in there, like who gets shown to who. So I couldn't really say if like the 10 would ever see the 3, but I don't know, maybe in some circumstances if there's like a density problem, because it's like once you ran out of people, like if you want to see people 10 miles away, once you ran out of those people in 10 miles, it would start going further and further out to show you because it didn't want to just show you anything, right? Or show you nothing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you run out of matches. But the caste system, it's interesting about that, because like, if you're doing something on a hotness score, and it's subject to how, you model the hotness score. One models a hotness score, right? And if it's modeled on like, I don't know, like things that, could cut someone short, right? Then it would be kind of a miss from the algorithmic perspective. But in real life, these two people could really, really hit it off, right?
I mean, romantic comedies about it. It's like what every 3 and 4 dreams about. They want to meet the 10. And you're very right. You're very right. I don't think it's any like malicious intent at all, but it's definitely like we're saying, paid, optimizing toward the paid user, optimizing towards those KPIs of success.
Because if you pay, then your hotness score automatically shoots up, right?
Right. Like,
you're in the cool kids club. It's kind of like getting into like an exclusive club here, right? Like, at least in New York, like, yeah, you could pay to get in, and then now you're in a room full of like very, very attractive people, right? You could somehow schmooze your way to get in. Is that kind of like the same effect that that Tinder was and Bumble were trying to create?
Yeah. Like, I don't know, kind of giving you something like to shoot for. Not that we were trying to create like exclusivity. Well, I shouldn't say that. Early on in Bumble, we had this feature called VIB, and it was like a VIP. Everything had to have a B pun back then. I got very sick of it very quickly. But it was definitely in response to like, remember Raya? I think Raya's still going. It was like invite only.
Yeah.
Just for the cool kids. It was supposed to be like that too. So it was like the top 1% of like Bumble people, and that matching score, that hotness score, played into like who we would identify as a potential VIP, right? And then those people would pay like whatever the fee was, and then your matches were segregated to people that were just VIP, or you could switch to the general user pool. And people loved it. Honestly, I don't know why we deprecated it. We should have kept it.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Yeah.
What went into that hotness score? Do you remember?
Oh man, I went to art school, like a bunch of engineering and math stuff that I don't understand.
Okay.
All I can speak to it is just kind of like high level, like what we were aiming for it to do. How it is specifically achieved that is you have to speak to someone smarter than me.
No, I get it. It's I do wonder though, like, 'cause look, as we talked about at the head of the conversation, like these algorithms are somewhat playing God here, right? I mean, with this hotness score, with this caste system that they've made up, they're deciding like who gets to meet each other, who gets to mate, right?
Right.
Who gets to potentially get married. And if that hotness score, for whatever reason, is counting you short, right? Let's just say, for example, there was somebody that wasn't deemed traditionally attractive, but they are attractive by their own niche or something of the sort, right? Something like innocuous like that.
Well,
I mean,
the score, it wasn't like objective hotness. It wasn't like an AI was looking at your picture and was like, I deem you a 5. It was based on how other people responded to you, right? So it's like,
yeah, your swipe right frequency.
Exactly. You earn the score based on like community interaction. So I mean, could you argue that, Bumble is assigning it and like playing God, like to a certain extent? But I think in a large part, it's produced by community interaction, right? Like how that person responds to the crowd, which is analogous to also human behavior too, right? Like you could be super hot, but you're like an ultra weirdo and you don't know how to talk to people. So like you're just going to get ostracized. And I feel like maybe you could mask that a little bit with like the hotness score. Like you could have a lot of like right swipes, but your interaction and like your chatting and stuff is going to be like way down. So I don't know. Like it's like half a dozen of one and six of the other. So
yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. How much I mean, it sounds like you guys did think about it, but how much do these apps think about, equitability, and fairness when it comes to, these
in the
matching algorithms?
In the early days, it was really on the honor system. It really was. I have given other interviews that I always said I felt I had to be the HR alarm sometimes in the Tinder because it was like a couple of frat boys, running away with it. But I mean,
sorry, honor system. What do you mean by that?
I mean, it's up to the people making it how much they want to push inclusivity versus exclusivity versus representation or equality. Because if they don't and they don't give a shit about it and they just want to optimize for KPIs, then that's what they do. And no one's really going to hold them accountable unless it's like a public outcry,
I see. So, I mean, yeah, as you said earlier at the head of the call, that's what the apps care for. Their business. They're trying to optimize KPIs. Mm-hmm. They got shareholders that they're trying to make a dividend for.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just like, coming from, an AI background, I just worry about this kind of stuff because, we just, the dating apps are clearly like a very, very good topic because, it's not regulated by any government body and they could do whatever the hell they want, as you put it, but they have such a huge societal impact. And the more and more we use AI algorithms, we outsource our decision making, and it could be potentially biased by somebody whose agenda is to boost user engagement for the sake of commercial interest, as opposed to doing something wholesome, which is positive for society, like finding your ultimate partner. Making that process easier. Right. So it seems like
it's ultimate capitalism, though. I mean, the same thing with Meta. They use a ranked algorithm. Same thing for Instagram, right? It's not chronological. And who does
it boosts content that promotes outrage, right?
Exactly. But they didn't do it because of that. They did it because of a great business decision, right? Like it made a ton of money for them and engagement was up and all this stuff. It's probably not good for us. I mean, it's definitely not good for us. Look what it's done. Like you said, it amplifies hate. It makes all this misinformation viral.
That's right.
And it's a function of the product, but it's also a function of the way that people use it too. And I guess the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, look, AI algorithms don't have any feelings, right? It's just like, okay, I'm optimizing. It's like literally, it was just like, okay, I'm optimized for user engagement. This piece of content gets the most user engagement. This profile gets the most right swipes, right? I don't care about being like politically fair or whatever. And I'm going to just promote this content or profile, right? It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, like during the, I think it was the 2018 or 2016 election. It was 2016, right? We were doing political filters for your Bumble profile pics. And I did like these little illustrations. I did one of like, Hillary and I think it was Ted Cruz. And I had to draw a Donald Trump one as much as I did not want to. But like I thought for the fact, it's like, well, people are people and everyone's going to have a different opinion. So, it's not a gender equality. It's not a whatever, but it's still like an inclusivity versus exclusivity of like, this is for everybody. So it's like you try and do those little things like me personally, right? Like I always fought for like being able to identify your gender, especially like on Tinder in the early days. or just realizing that maybe there's a spectrum of the way that people identify in gender, and we shouldn't be the arbiters of who gets to say what and who is what, right? Like people are people, let them just say yes or no or whoever. So I don't know. Like I said, though, that's the honor system. That's hoping that people want to prioritize that over the other stuff, and sometimes the other stuff wins out.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I do hope that, like, at some point, just the EU just released. Did you see that the EU just released something to regulate algorithms, AI algorithms,
Really?
social scoring?
Oh,
yeah. I think the US is going to follow suit as well. That's just kind of the ever going pattern.
mm-hmm.
But no, it should be very, very interesting next 5 years for this type of stuff, right? I mean, because God forbid, like, if this was call it like the financial system, like a bank loan situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing this kind of stuff, like, then there'd be a certain people that benefit from this immensely.
Yeah.
Can you one more question on this particular topic? But can you say what the ideal stats are like for a Bumble profile?
No mirror selfies, no shirtless pics of you holding a fish, no pics with large cats. Apparently that was a thing. Man, there's been some weird people. No, man, just be yourself. Just don't try and like front and be something else. I don't know. Although in my profiles, I always put like, co-founder or this or that or the other. So I feel like I had a little, but I didn't use the apps until like way after the fact. So I don't know. So
not when you were designing like the core. The guts of
I would say the ultimate profile is be the co-founder of the dating app that you're trying to make a profile.
That's a good answer. Yeah, so like I've also had a good amount of experience doing offline dates myself, and yes. I was during this period of preparation for you, I was juxtaposing like the IRL offline dates. By the way, I do apologize for any of the subjects or the people that I was going on experimental dates with. Sorry for wasting your time, but obviously it's for a good reason. And so, what I found is that some of the problems I hear about with the offline dating, it's not perfect, right? Because now it's like, what does Tinder give you? What does these apps give? They give you convenience, right? You can swipe on a bunch of people. You could position a date all in the comfort of your couch, and you could go on a date. Now, obviously, like we just talked about, how it turns out to not really be that successful, but yeah, there are a segment of people, especially here in New York, that just don't have time to date, and so like, the offline date, while it's far more romantic, it's far more, there's a bit of a fairy tale. There's serendipity involved, etc. They seem to have problems of like, one, time commitment to, make that fairy tale up. And number two, like, there are reputational risks, right? For kind of being openly, I guess, like dating, not to mention like the forgotten skill of cold approaching and things like that. Like, right. I mean, post pandemic, I don't even know if people know how to do that anymore. But yeah, so
one, me in real life, like meet me on the dating app, you weirdo.
Yeah, exactly. Where are you? If I hold my phone closer to you. But yeah, so you've got like, a lack of skill, potentially a reputational risk. And then like, there's always like, if you're in the same social circle, like being friend zoned, right? Like not, maybe this is part of the skill part, that I've been hearing about. It's like, these are the two biggest things, like, reputational risk and being friend zoned, that hold them back from dating in offline, in real life, with the same social circle over and over. Do you have any opinion on that?
Oh man, like dating is hard no matter which way you slice it. Like you said, swiping on your couch, like low effort serotonin, yes, but like lasting results, statistically, no, right? versus super high barrier to engagement of me finding some, I don't know, like run club or a speed dating something, or like, getting ready and taking a shower and going out of the house and actually like interfacing with a human being. I don't know. Like, what's the good answer? Is there an in between? Maybe like both seem to have their like inherent, I think, problems. Maybe the IRL thing is kind of like seeing its day right now as far as like a consumer trend. But I mean, it's all kind of like up to the services and maybe the ecosystems that are in reaction or hopefully like an intentional response to that type of behavior, to either amplify it or kind of channel it away into some other like behavior, right? Like there's some maybe a monetizable behavior. I don't know. I don't know. I kind of danced.
Yeah.
But
we talked about like, earlier, like how to monetize apps. I mean, pretty much the only way to monetize these apps are through paid users, right?
Yeah. So, or advertising, right? Which personally, I detest traditional like targeted ads.
Like they're selling third-party data type of thing.
Yeah. It's super data rapey. Pardon my language, but I just don't. I don't like it. It's a great innovation for the business itself, but the efficacy of it goes down over time because the people that respond can only respond like so much, and the people that don't respond will never respond. So they're getting more invasive and tracking your data without your permission to try and increase that conversion rate. And the more the efficacy goes down, the more data rapey it gets. Right? Because they're trying to produce results. So my personal response to that was like that I didn't want to have like ads on Tinder and Bumble because I thought that was gross. So the monetization opportunities came from like increasing the core USP of the product, right? Like get shown to more people. Okay. See the people that like you. XYZ, send a thing first, send a sticker, send a whatever. And the partnerships that we did were like brand affiliate partnerships. The one that stands out was the Spotify partnership, right? It wasn't Spotify advertising on Bumble. It was Bumble adding in Spotify as another metric of how you're going to match with people because your music tastes matter, right? So that's like
interesting.
That's like a really synergistic partnership. And we're going to share a lot of like new users, right? Spotify people are going to hear about.
That's interesting. I mean, I don't think most people know that, but like, so you're basically saying that, to suss out compatibility that like, maybe it's more than the hotness score. Yeah. It's a compatibility score. If a user connects to Spotify, they'll be able to find at least people that they have a similar music taste with.
Yep. Same thing with Instagram, right? It gives you like a little more color on who that person is that you might make a better match. So
you mean that, but the algorithm does this behind the hood, behind the curtain, right?
Yeah, actually, I can't say if they actually took the Spotify like playlist into account on the matching algorithm, but I can tell you it did have like a marked effect on how people swipe if someone had their Spotify connected versus if they did, right? It's just another like part of the spectrum that you can look at. So like I said, it didn't. I don't even know if it took into account on the algorithm like programmatically. But like what it did is, as far as like consumer behavior, is it painted more of a picture of who that like human being was. It's not just like another picture on a dating app,
Gotcha. So it was kind of up to the user to still kind of suss out whether or not that person's playlist or whatever, or Instagram account, or whatever, aligned with them. Gotcha. And so like, I mean, Chris, could you tell, you've done a lot of interesting stuff. Thank you for walking us through this journey. But what's next, man? Like obviously we talked a lot about how the timing is keen right now for IRL, in real life type of events, and how, if the goal is for a long lasting connection, offline is a much better platform for those serendipitous encounters that that lead to a long-lasting type of a relationship. So yeah, help me understand what Chris is thinking about next.
Well, the dating space in general definitely trending toward IRL. Like I mentioned before, Bumble and Tinder, and I'm sure some of the other dating properties are going after like these run clubs, They're all spouting community as a buzzword. They're looking into events, right? Like we're seeing this big consumer trend toward like Partiful and Eventbrite, people going out to these like IRL things to meet people, and it's not going unnoticed by the incumbent dating apps. As far as like how they're going to integrate that into the existing products, I really couldn't tell you, because it kind of seems like apples and oranges, right? Like meeting people in community events, IRL, making these like really like qualitative connections almost seems like opposed to what the product is. It's like going to like McDonald's and wanting to order like a nice sit down steak dinner, right? Like the setting doesn't match the intent. So unless they're going to try and like, or release companion apps or something. I know Bumble tried to put some like community or groups inside of their.
In other words, they've been kind of typecasted.
Yeah. It's like, well, what are you going to be? Like you're a swiping app. Are you going to take out swiping and try and like, or are you going to try and like add in another one the way that, Meta owns Facebook and Instagram? Like, sure, there could be a life with that because there are paying users in, traditional Bumble, but consumer trends are definitely going towards the IRL, the events, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, where's the reconciliation? Is there room for someone new to come in? I think there's a lot of room in the general community space, not just for dating, but for like just human connection, for networking, for friends, for whatever. Bumble tried to do the whole BFFs thing and networking thing, which I think are a brilliant way to get people into a dating app that would not ordinarily go to a dating app. But does it solve the problem of making friends and business connections? That's debatable. I don't really want to swipe on a bunch of dudes to try and make business connections, just because swiping is synonymous with dating, right? And I don't want to look at a picture and swipe on you based on what you look like for business reasons. So that I think that speaks to a generally larger trend of people trying to like meet other people and make friends and grow their social circles, just because there's kind of a hole in consumer social right now. Like a majority of the KPIs on Facebook are derived in like the group settings, but they actively deprioritize that stuff because they monetize the individual newsfeed better. So it's like this redheaded stepchild who is like, getting all muscular and ripped, and like no one's really paying attention, and that's like where all the stuff's happening. But also,
so sorry, that monetizing the newsfeed.
Yeah, that's where their key monetization is, right? They don't know how to monetize the group setting as well. I mean, they're throwing in ads, but they see the majority of their the revenue coming from just the generalized newsfeed, right? Like not any like group actions.
That's right.
So I don't know. I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's you can't ignore the consumer behavior and the trends that are happening right now. I think consumers are speaking very loudly that they want a different type of connection. What the modality of that looks like, I don't know. I think it's kind of like up in the air. There's like Web3 folks trying to do Web3 apps with tokens. I don't know if that's going to work. There's community stuff. Like I said, the incumbents are really like seeing this behavior. I don't know how they're going to capitalize on it. Like we were talking before, there's AI. How that factors in is still, I think, up for debate. There's been a lot of like discussion on what it looks like and how it can help. But what's the vessel for it? What's the best way to employ that technology into making a match and like really like leverage it? I don't know. Is it your wingman? Like that would be kind of cool. There's all sorts of
an AI wingman.
Right? I've heard lots of very creative and like insightful ideas, but I don't know. There's no outstanding leader right now. I think Hinge has gotten the most press lately, just because it was kind of the newest out of the three, Tinder and Bumble. I think maybe it's seen its peak during the pandemic. Everyone was like really into it and coming out of the pandemic, but now their KPIs are leveling off a little bit. So I don't know, man. I don't know. That's kind of like a big question mark. It seems like a very open game right now.
Yeah, it definitely does. I often think about like how AI, as you put it, plays a role in this, being an AI engineer myself, and trying to think about like how it actually could play a role. We're trying to get off the apps, but like,
Yeah.
we
live on our phones, right? We live on our phones all day long. So it only makes sense that it's like, you're going to interface with it somehow. And like, who knows how that's going to be, but I don't know. You can't fight how we live our everyday lives.
Yeah, and kind of to piggyback on what we talked about earlier, I always think that there's going to be like a segment of users that, again, like just don't have time. They're not interested in that fairy tale. And I think that apps, will forever serve those type of people.
Yeah.
Hopefully a little better than they are right now. Especially like, if there's something that is new that kind of takes away a lot of the noise that we see in the swiping based apps. Like, meaning like if there's an alternative, like, I don't know how good these run clubs are going to do. I think like everyone kind of knows them as run clubs. And frankly, I tried them as well. There's one called, well, actually, I don't want to say the name of it, but let's just say I'm here in New York, and there's one like down the street from me, and they gather there, and there's 1,000 people that show up. Right? Yeah, it's insane. But and it's a run club for singles. What I noticed was that any type of event like speed dating. Have you ever been to a speed dating event?
I've never participated in it, but I've seen it in person, and it's like a speed dating zoo.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, shit on it, but like to me, like these type of events that are pre-positioned as singles events, they tend to be, one, dude heavy, and number two, like the quality is just, I don't know, I just don't think it's the best.
Yeah. No, I mean, like but those seem like obvious problems in it, right? Like the people that you get to respond probably aren't going to be like the most desirable people that you want to date in the first place, and the results that you get.
Yeah, like Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt are not going to show up on
exactly
on a lunch. On a run club, singles run club.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. But honestly, in the early days, there was a real stigma about dating apps themselves before dating was like inherently.
Oh yeah, it used to be weird.
Oh man, nobody wanted to admit that they were on a dating app, and we actually had a real problem with like creating a viral coefficient just because nobody wanted to share that they were on a dating app until it became this destigmatized, like, oh, it's okay, I'm on Bumble or Tinder. It became the lexicon. Then people would start sharing. But dude, in the early days, nobody wanted to say boo that I was on a dating app. So just give it a while.
I think it's still part of like the benefit of being on a dating app. Like as I see it, like as we talked about, like dating in IRL, especially if you're doing it in the same social circles, there's reputational risk, right? Whereas like dating apps, it provide this kind of like incognito mode, like that just like that Google window, or nothing good goes on when you're searching in incognito. Okay, let's be honest here.
Yeah.
So it's like it just seems like highly optimized for like kind of short term things, as we touched on earlier.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, cool. I mean, look, this has been like a really, really good interview. I thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, I mean, anything else you want to add or talk about? We covered a lot, but
yeah, I don't know. There's beyond dating, I think there's just a general hole in consumer social, and in just general like human connection, right? Like as a whole. We're seeing all this like weird kind of division between like Facebook and Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, and like dating apps. Everyone's kind of like dancing like around this type of behavior. And now, like I said, we're seeing the rise of events and people wanting more qualitative interactions. So it's kind of this like, what's going to happen? Like, what's going to break? Is it going to be strictly dating? Is it going to be general social? Is it going to be a couple? Maybe it's going to be like a whole new wave of stuff. I mean, just given like the whole like social climate, like what's happening politically, this is kind of a unique time right now, and it's kind of I don't know. It's a little exciting. It's a little eerie. It's a little like weird to see like what's going to come out. But
Politically, you mean the election coming up?
yeah, for sure, for sure. There's a lot of like division. There's a lot of like hard feelings. I don't know. You see it reflective of like the music and the movies that come out. We've been in kind of this like creative lull, I think, the past couple of years, especially post pandemic. So, and like, our technology inherently reflects the mood, like the vibe of the time. So,
Oh, when you say a creative lull, like you mean from like an artist perspective?
yeah, I feel like everything's kind of been like, I don't know. We're not seeing a lot of like new original stuff coming out. We're seeing a lot of like rehashed like movies from the past, or like old stuff being churned out. Like this like creative kind of like black hole lately. I don't know. Maybe it's just more like personal or anecdotal, but I don't know. Like we haven't seen any like new big consumer products come up and like really delight people. It doesn't seem like people are very like happy on social either too. So I don't know. I just think it's the general market is kind of like primed for something to come up and maybe like divert us all away from what's happening. I don't know. It's kind of a nebulous, neither here nor there, but like, I don't know. I haven't seen this type of like this kind of climate especially in consumer social since I've been involved. So I don't know. Take it for what you will, but I just feel like we're not quite sure what's coming, but something like there's like a new class coming.
Yeah, it seems like we're due for a paradigm shift. Obviously, like we talked about, like, the shift when Steve Jobs put all these smartphones in everyone's hands, and then you came out with the inventing the swipe app, and that was a huge paradigm shift. And we talked about dating apps were like for weirdos. Now it is a de facto norm of how everyone dates. And so it sounds like we're doing a big swing back into IRL, and nobody really knows how that's gonna take shape, because again, these community stuff is great, but the problem is scale, right? You don't get the same type of scale as you would if you just release a dating app. And so how do you scale something like that, right?
And consumers are fickle. So
you would know that.
Very true.
Yeah. Well, Chris, hey man, thank you so much for joining the call, and bestowing insight upon all of us. These are questions that a lot of people have, so I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy this episode. I certainly did, I can't wait to hear about what you come up with next.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a couple days away from first draft of the MVP, and we're going to start doing a little user testing and onboarding some initial communities, and hopefully maybe by springtime you might hear a little something.
All right, keep the suspense going.